Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are heading up to the Bay Area to Oakland, California. And this week, it's going to be super fun because we get to learn about two different occupations that fall under the umbrella of journalism and media studies. We're going to know what it's like to ask questions, sometimes really difficult questions, and also what it's like to be on the other end, answering those questions, sometimes very difficult questions. Our guest is Josh Sasaki. He attended San Diego State from 1988 to 1991. He worked in broadcast journalism. He went from San Diego to Yuma to Reno to the Bay Area. He had a legendary decorated career at KTVU in Oakland for 2 decades. And now for the last 7 years, he has been the director of communications for the Oakland Unified School District. John, we're proud to have you alum. Thanks so much for joining us on the Where You At podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that. I'm not sure whether I would call myself legendary, but you know, I'll take it. That sounds fun.
Well, I watched you a lot on the KTVU news, and it felt like every time there was an important story, there was John on my TV screen. Whether it was the first story or whether it was the third story, it felt like you were always there. So you are a legend in my mind, John.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to trace the journey of John because it's an interesting way that he got into journalism. I'm curious to learn about, and we're going to kind of go this full circle. But I want to start with this, John. If someone is a student right now and they're thinking, maybe I'm going to go down the path of journalism, or maybe I'm going to go down the path of public relations, or maybe they are already chosen one, but they're starting to wonder whether they should switch to go to the other side. Give us sort of the nutshell things that they should consider in terms of the job, the work-life balance, the money, the glory of being on TV versus the glory of being someone who's kind of helping behind the scenes. How would you kind of sum up what people should be thinking about if they are considering one of these two different careers?
Boy, that's a loaded question right there. And I would say, listen, when it comes to being a journalist, the number one thing you have to have is an inquisitive mind. You want to know. You want to know what's going on. You want to know what's happening. You want to know the people involved. You want to be there on the scene when you're able to see something, if something's good, something bad. You like the emotion of stories. You like to write. If those are the kinds of things that you like to do that appeal to you, and you like to, in my case, the case of broadcast journalism as opposed to print journalism, you like to be the person to tell the story, then this could be for you. It's obviously telling the story if you're in print as well, but not maybe on camera like this or on a microphone or whatever. So it really is dependent on the kind of person it is. Oddly enough, my dad, who went to Fresno State, also Chico State, he was a reporter for a little bit of time in Visalia, a newspaper reporter back in the day, a long time ago. And he gave it up because he, in the end, didn't really like the idea of meeting all these people all the time. He was kind of a shy person, so he just didn't want to do that. So instead, he became a teacher. He was a school teacher at Berkeley High School for a long time, where he's interacting with kids, which I guess didn't provide the same kinds of concerns with regard to his shyness. And so I would say the reason I bring that up is if you're a shy person, if you maybe don't like the whole idea of public speaking or things like that, then maybe a broadcast journalism sort of career might not really be for you. But it really does come down to what motivates you. What do you want to know about the world? What do you want to share with others about the world? And that was kind of one of the driving forces behind why I got into business in the first place. Is I really did have an inquisitive mind and I wanted to know the answers to things. With regard to the other side, the communication side of kind of the whole milieu, it's a very different sort of job. I on the one hand, I refer to myself where before I was a Bay Area reporter, a reporter for the whole Bay Area. Now I'm a reporter for Oakland Unified School District, where I report to within our community on stuff going on just in our community. I don't really report on things outside. And so I'm still doing a lot of the same kind of work where, I don't really report on camera for us per se, but I, do a lot of writing. I share out press releases with not only our community, but also the media. And then when it comes to on camera stuff, I'm on camera certainly. If anybody's interviewing me about one thing or another, go on the radio periodically as well. So it's a lot of very related things, a lot of the same sorts of skills you use, one versus the other. And actually, that was really a big part of the reason that when I left television news, I knew that I wanted to go into something that used those same skills and the same tools, and communications made the most sense. And then when I found the job at Oakland Unified back in 2016, I realized that this was a job that was kind of made for me because of the fact that I had worked in Oakland for 2 years or 20 years already at that point at Channel 2, which is, it's funny because I went from an office in Jack London Square. I don't know if anybody knows the Bay Area, in Jack London Square, to an office about a mile away on Broadway in downtown Oakland. So it was like basically going to the same job with regard to geography. But then it just kind of was more encapsulated within the district after that. So it just, it worked out really well for me that I transferred into a new profession where I could use those skills and the tools that I kind of gathered along the way in television news to really focus on one segment of our population in the Bay Area, and that is the kids, the families, the staff of Oakland Unified School District. So I would say that, if you want to go into communications, it's a very different kind of job than news, but it's one that's super important. Whether you're a big company or a school district or a city or a police department, you need people to communicate for you, and not everybody can do it. It's not a skill that just anybody can do, as anybody who's in the communications department at San Diego State knows. There's a lot you have to learn. One of the best tools, though, for anybody going into communications is really understanding how the news business works, because that's one of your primary targets is the news business, is really letting them know what's happening and getting them to do stories and things like that, spreading the word more broadly. So really understanding news helps a great deal. And that was one of the reasons that I was brought into Oakland Unified School District. So I would say that either one is a great business for very different reasons. They do have, a lot of challenges, especially news, really, because news never sleeps. They go 24/7, and so that means working nights, that means working weekends, holidays. You don't get much of a vacation over Christmas in a lot of cases, depending on seniority, if that's the kind of shop you're working in. They can definitely be weird hours. They can be tough, but communications can be tough too. Communications never ends as well in different ways. And I would actually say that I work significantly longer hours now than I did when I was in news. So but I'll tell you, I can't tell you how grateful I am and lucky I feel to have had two great careers that I really love. Both of them. I love being a TV reporter. That was a lot of fun. Had some great experiences, and I love working for the kids of Oakland and getting their messages out to the broader community.
I love the distinction that you had there, John. And I think that it's such fascinating how you got to journalism, though, because I would just assume that you just were a journalism major from day one, but I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and initially you went to Whittier College, you studied economics, you played lacrosse, then you went to San Diego State and you majored in psychology. So how did journalism come into through all of this?
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is actually one of the things that I tell kids all the time, whether I'm doing career day or just meeting kids on the lacrosse team that I coach or anywhere else. I tell kids to keep their eyes and ears wide open at all times, because you never know where the inspiration for a career will come from. And it's bottom line. You never know when it's going to hit you. In my case, it hit me one sunny afternoon walking across the campus of San Diego State. This is probably a year and a half or so into my career at San Diego State. And I'm just walking across campus, and I run into a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, a friend from school who I'm still friends with now, but someone who I hadn't seen since the previous semester. His name was Chris Wells, a really good guy. Just saw him not that long ago up here in the Bay Area. And so he and I are talking, we're catching up. We hadn't seen each other in a while. And he says to me, you know, I was thinking about you during the summer. I was like, okay, well, that's weird. Why? And he said, well, I was sitting there watching the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. And he says, I said to myself, who does this guy remind me of? Who's this guy sound like? And he said that Brokaw, for those of you who remember Tom Brokaw, Brokaw's voice reminded him of me. And I was like, well, that's cool. And then I swear to you, it was at that moment that I said to myself, TV news, I could do that. And that's where the whole idea came from. I had never had the idea before. I might have come across the idea, at some other time. But then what ended up happening from that is I was in a class. I don't remember what the class was. And I was reading the book in that class. And it was a very fleeting passage in that book talking about an internship in Washington, D.C. That's all it was. It was just a passing reference to an internship in Washington, D.C. Within a year, I was interning at CNN in Washington, D.C. And it was from that I built a 25-year career in television news. So you literally never know where the idea, the inspiration is going to come from. And there's no question, too, that I would not be doing what I'm doing now had it not been for my career in news. So I owe everything to that idea from Chris. It wasn't like he was suggesting it to me either. It just came, right? And I've had 35 years, almost 35 years of great career because of a random conversation I had walking down across the quad at San Diego State.
Did you name a child after Chris? How do you repay someone who leads to this 35-year career after that?
If I had had any children, yes, I would have done that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. I love it. Okay. So now you got to play catch up though, because you've been studying economics, you've been studying psychology. How do you quickly catch up in order to start to get that internship in Washington, D.C. with CNN and start on your path?
Internships, when you're connected with the right organization, internships aren't too hard to get. They're even in the Bay Area, Bay Area, San Diego, wherever you are, they're not too hard to get because bottom line is, especially news organizations, they're hiring interns to work for free. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that hard. When you're in school, it's not that hard to get an internship. And while the education you can receive in school is great, I never took any TCF classes, telecommunications and film. I never took any journalism classes. I never took any communications classes. And so all the learning that I did prior to my actual first job was as an intern. I interned at CNN. I interned at KTVU in the Bay Area, where I worked for 20 years. And I interned at KGTV, which is the ABC station in San Diego as well. And in each of those, I learned different things. At KGTV, which was in the fall of my final, let's see, it was in the final year. I think it was my final year at San Diego State. What I did was I wrote. I actually worked on the morning show, and I wrote for the morning show. And I started to learn how to write news by doing that. Until you're really writing it for under the pressure of deadlines and all that, knowing that this has to be on the air in an hour or 2 hours or whatever, you don't really get into that cadence of the everyday newsroom. So you learn a lot in the class. It's great, but I would advise anybody who wants to get into news to actually intern in a newsroom to really feel what it's like. And then when I was at KTVU during the summer one year, I learned a little bit about the basics of being a reporter, and I'd go out and do some interviews, and I'd work on the assignment desk, answer phones and things like that, right? So being an intern, you really start to see what it's like to be in a newsroom, what it's like to work in a newsroom. But until you actually are really paid for it, because interns they're dependent on, but only to a certain extent, until you're actually paid for that work you're doing in a newsroom, it doesn't really take hold. Once you're in a newsroom working for money every single day, which is what I did as my first paid job at KNSD, which is the NBC station in San Diego. I started there as an associate producer, working on all the shows and editing video and writing and all that. Until you're doing that, you don't really get the knack of it. That's when you really start to really gain the full understanding of how a newsroom works, all the things that go into a show, all the things that go into a story. So again, interning's great. Communications telecommunications and film journalism classes are great. Getting those degrees is great, but until you start interning, you've kind of hit a wall. And then until you start the full-time gig where you're working for money, you hit another wall beyond interning. So each level that you go beyond, you're going to be learning more and more. And so that after a year and a half I spent at KNSD, I went off to be a reporter, like you said, in Arizona in Yuma. And day one, I was able to run in and do all the things I needed to do to get my story on the air, including edit the whole story myself. I already knew how to do that. So the training of education in general at San Diego State that I got was fantastic. The internships at CNN and KTVU and KGTV were all fantastic. They all taught me a great deal. But that first year and a half working in the news business as a paid employee at KNSD is what really set me over the top with regard to being prepared to become a reporter down the road.
I want to ask you more questions about those initial jobs, but before I do that, San Diego State memories. Besides this great conversation with Chris that changes your life, what are just some of your other favorite memories, favorite stories, classes, other classmates that really just stand out about your time as an Aztec?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it was such a fantastic experience to be at San Diego State. In fact, when I applied for college out of high school, I applied to one school and I got in and I went there, Whittier College. When I knew I was transferring, because Whittier is a small private liberal arts school, it was expensive. I ran out of money, so I needed to go somewhere a little more inexpensive. I applied for one school, I got in, and I went. And that was San Diego State. So I applied for two schools and went to both of them. I did transfer in, obviously, as a transfer student. I was never a freshman there. And I actually transferred in the middle of the year because I had to wait a semester in order to get in. And so I came in the spring of '88. And I moved into the very horribly named dormitory that was there. It was a private dormitory called El Conquistador. I think we all remember.
El Conch.
Yeah, El Conch, exactly. And it was a great place to live. Wasn't a fan of the name, obviously, but really cool people in the dorm. I still have very good friends from there, Chris being one of them. Another friend, Perry Giroux, he actually lives like 2 miles from me. He's from the Bay Area as well, as is Chris. Chris lives in Santa Cruz. And so, that was the number one thing about moving into San Diego State and San Diego in general. But the dorm was, for me, I knew I was moving in middle of the year. I was coming in without any friends. I didn't want to just move into an apartment. I wanted to make friends. And so that's why I moved into the dorm. And maybe at the time that private dorm was the easiest one to get into. I forget exactly what I was thinking there, but so, had lots of great memories there. That was a fun semester to be there. And then moving off to what was then called Sunrise Point. I don't know if you know that development. It's a big apartment complex that's, down a ways, up a hill, all that. And so, just gaining a real perspective on San Diego. It was a great, great city. You can't beat the weather. I'm sure that's what it looks like there right now, right behind you. And just, learning so much. I mean, the professors at San Diego State were great. Had a really good time learning all that I did and getting that degree in psychology and learning all the other things I did as well, taking anthropology classes and various science classes. And so it was really a good experience. And, obviously you can't really beat the social scene as well. Have a lot of great friends and a lot of great memories. And you actually mentioned lacrosse. I actually, when I played 2 years at Whittier and then I transferred over and I actually started playing at San Diego State as well. But after a game, I decided to move on from it and actually my grades went up. So I guess I made the right decision, but I, to this day, I kind of regret not having tried to play a little bit more because it was fun and it was a cool group. But I hear lots and lots about how they and the women's team are doing, and it's really, really exciting to see them doing well. So, San Diego State was a great place. During the time that I was there, I also, had various jobs. Like I worked at TGI Fridays over in Mission Valley. I worked at Benihana, again in Mission Valley. I worked at the YMCA as well in Mission Valley. All those things, all those experiences really contributed to who I am now. And I can't thank San Diego in general, San Diego State specifically, and then all the things around San Diego State that really contributed to who I am today.
So let's talk about newsroom. And you started to mention your initial times in newsrooms. And I think it's really important that, especially for students, to understand the culture of a newsroom. You were in a lot of different newsrooms in your career, John. How about you just finish this sentence for me? A newsroom is at its best when what is happening?
That's a really interesting question. I'm going to say, newsrooms can be, certainly, depending on the newsroom, depending on how they are, but generally the newsrooms that I worked in are at their best when a lot is happening. It's because you've got like a really big story, something breaking, and I'll just think offhand here. One example of that would be, I don't know if you recall, but it was probably like 2010, 2012, somewhere in there. There was the big gas explosion from
I remember the story.
over kind of near the San Francisco airport. And that was one of those cases where everybody just jumped into action because it was a huge, huge fire. I mean, it ended up being fatal to a number of people. It was a big controversy for a long time. When it first happened, we were like, because it was near the San Francisco airport, we were like, oh, did a plane crash? We don't know, right? And so, I was one of quite a few crews that went over from our newsroom in Oakland over to that, was it San Bruno, I believe, where it happened, somewhere in that area, and near the San Francisco airport. And so we're all there, and we're getting as much information as we can, as quickly as we can. And it's when things like that are going on that newsrooms really shine. It's obviously dependent on the people, dependent on the way they work together, et cetera. But those are exciting times. And those are some of the times that I actually miss, is when something's really going on and we have to get information to our viewers to make sure everybody's up to date, knows the latest, if there's dangers, et cetera. And so, yeah, I'd say that by and large, it's when there's really big breaking news, that's when newsrooms really shine.
I like to try and get as much practical advice for students. And I think that one of the hardest parts is just getting comfortable on camera, looking into the camera, being relaxed, not having your eyes wander, your eyes start to go up because you can't remember what you wanted to say. Take us through your evolution. It's 30 seconds before you're about to do the live shot, John. You can hear in your ear, the anchors are about ready to set you up. The camera's on, the lights are on, it's about showtime. What would you do the last 30 seconds to get yourself ready for this live shot?
Some of my friends would answer that in a very funny way, because sometimes I'd be on the phone with them. Like I'd have all my stuff done. I'd be like sitting there waiting for my live shot, and I'd be on the phone. I'd be like, "Hey, let me call you back." I'd hang up, get on the air. They'd see me on the air, and then literally a minute later, I'd call them back. And so sometimes it involved me hanging up with my friend or whoever I'm talking to, and just getting ready. And again, it's kind of dependent on the kind of live shot, the kind of story you're doing, et cetera. But by and large, you wouldn't have to do too much at that point, because most everything that you're putting on the air that night or that day or that morning, whatever it is already in the can, as it were. Those in journalism know what TV journalism especially know. In the can means the product is completed. And so all I have to do as a reporter is be out live, toss to that product, which is what's called a package in TV news parlance. And that's package being, some video, some sound bites, and some of my voice narrating what's going on in that story. And that's all pre-edited. So that's this package form. And so I get on the air, I say a few words, couple sentences about what's coming up, and then it goes to that package. And then after it's over, it comes back to me, and I say a few words kind of wrapping it up, and I throw back to the anchors. And so there isn't a ton in those cases that you really have to do. Now, it's a very different story if, let's say, you are you're just arriving at a scene. You have been on the road for the past 20 minutes trying to find information on the phone and whatever you can. But let's say there's a fire, and so I'm getting we're setting up a live shot. We're going to be going on in 2 minutes. I'm trying to gather as much information about what's going on at that moment as I can, and then just digest it as quickly as I can, then get back and then go on the air and explain what I just learned about what's happening, and talk about whatever I'm seeing. So there is maybe some more preparation that goes on in kind of a last minute reporting situation than there is in something that's a little more pre-prepared. Those times for me, especially later in my career, that was the most fun. I mean, doing the live work was the most fun. And I, whether it was breaking news, trying to find it out at the last second, or, more pre-prepared package, all of that was really enjoyable. And so it's just a matter of getting things, kind of in order, making sure that you have the information you need, hoping that the anchor, after you toss back to them, doesn't ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. Sometimes that happens, and you have to say something like, hey, I'll find that out. I'll get back to you. Something like that. And so it really is. It's a really fun business. It's exciting. It can be crazy in so many different ways. It can be really, really crazy. Not sure it's as glamorous. I think you used that word earlier, kind of glamorous. It's not really a glamorous position, especially these days, partly because not as many people watch the news, certainly local news, as they used to. And glamour implies, getting treated really, really well and not having to do the kinds of things, the kinds of things that maybe a lot of people don't know go into putting a news product together. And most people do. And, you have to carry the tripod. You have to help the photographer, if indeed you have a photographer. A lot of people these days don't even have photographers. They're what are called multimedia journalists, MMJs. And that's become a more common thing in the TV news business. Is someone who works on their own, even running their own live shot, which I personally think is a little bit dangerous, especially, having seen some problems with live shots here in the Bay Area. But the bottom line is, for those who really want to learn about the world, learn about themselves, learn about people and places and things, news business can really be for you. And that's one of the things I really talk about in general when I'm speaking to a class about television news is that it's one of those places where I always felt like I was learning something new every day. I would go out, interview people, oftentimes about a topic I knew nothing about. And I'd learn about the topic. I'd learn about the things that go into it. I'd learn about the people. I'd hear other people's stories. I'd learn a little bit about myself. I'd learn, and that was constant. And so that's a really neat aspect to the television news business, the news business in general, because you're always learning. And so, yeah, if that's your jam, go for it.
Let me ask you about asking tough questions. And you mentioned how your father was shy and that's how he got out of the news business. Sometimes you get to a story and people are all smiles and they're happy that you're there. Other times you do a story and they're not very happy that the news is there. They're trying to dodge you. Just in general, what is your strategy for the best way to ask a tough question?
Have no fear. Bottom line, have no fear. When I was interning at CNN in Washington, one of the things that stands out in my memory there was the day Jesse Jackson was inside the studios, and I was helping him walk out after he was done doing his on-camera interview or whatever it was. And I said, Reverend Jackson, I have a question for you. And at the time, Minister Louis Farrakhan was talking a great deal about having a lot of African-American people go back to Africa and create their own country there, kind of a homeland in Africa. And it was a very controversial thing to be saying at the time. I don't know really if it's something that's talked about much now, but it was very controversial at the time. It sparked a lot of heated exchanges, et cetera. And so I asked Reverend Jackson about that, and he kind of he said that's something that people have been talking about for a while, and it's worth thinking about. He gave a very diplomatic response to it. But the producer that I was walking with, who was also walking the Reverend out, said to me after we'd said goodbye to the Reverend, he's like, wow, I never would have asked him that question. That was pretty bold. And I'm like, well, I don't know why that's bold. I mean, it's just asking a question. What's he going to do? I mean, he's not going to kick me in the head. So are there situations where you have to be kind of careful? Sure. There are times when you're dealing with maybe some more unsavory people who might want to do you harm. I probably wouldn't be trying to interview those people anyway. I'd try to be a little more careful, but most cases, even, really powerful politicians, really powerful business owners, really powerful whatever, right? The worst they can do is ignore you. Second worst is they say no comment. But there's always a possibility they're going to give you an answer, and a real answer, and something that you can really use. So I don't really think that asking tough questions should be difficult at all, to tell you the truth. As long as you're not afraid of rejection, because you get rejected all the time. And to be honest with you, whenever we would go out and do MOS, are you familiar with television news parlance?
Yes.
MOS being man on the street interviews. So that's just trying to get kind of get the pulse of what the public is thinking about a topic, gay marriage or abortion or, the war and wherever, right? Asking people just kind of randomly at a gas station or, on a street corner or whatever, just asking people randomly. I can't tell you how many times I would be doing that, standing on a street corner in San Francisco or somewhere else. And I'd be asking people as they're walking by, do you mind talking? I have a question for you. And it's really at that point where you get rejected left and right. I mean, you honestly, what I would say is I feel like a homeless person asking for a buck, because most people would either say, no comment, get away, I don't want to talk to you, ignore you entirely. And so rejection, there's no question, rejection is one of the things you have to get used to in news. It's funny because, in so many cases, people either want to be on camera, they're like behind you waving, when you're on camera, or they want to have nothing to do with you. So it's this really interesting dichotomy there too. So the rejection is something that you just have to learn to kind of get over.
We're going to get to your transition to communications momentarily, but at least one more question about news. And I know the news business has changed a lot since you first started, John, but when it comes to Yuma, to Reno, to the Bay Area, what were your strategies for when is the time to move up a market? What is the best way to try to get the next job, to try to move up, to try to get to this bigger market? What did you do that students can still learn from today?
Gosh, that's again, really good question. And I would say that there wasn't a strategy per se, other than I want to do it as quickly as I can. So leaving KNSD in sunny, beautiful San Diego to go to KYMA, Channel 11 NBC station in Yuma, Arizona, that was a tough one. Mm-hmm. That was tough to go from San Diego, one of the most desirable places on earth, to Yuma, which not technically generally referred to in those kinds of terms. It was a great town, loved being there, but yeah, I didn't really want to be there for very long. And so for me, it was my opportunity actually kind of came to me. And that was because when I was working at NBC station in the Bay Area, in San Diego, KNSD, I had gotten a job through an APTRA, that is the Associated Press Television Radio Arts Organization. I had met someone there who was at the station in Yuma. I'd given her my resume, my tape, all that stuff to give to her news director, and he offered me a job, and so I accepted it. And before I left San Diego to go off to Yuma, I got a call from someone who I knew who worked at a station in Reno, and they were looking at me to be a reporter in Reno. I said to them, I'd love to, but I can't. I have already accepted this position in Arizona. I have to go. It's not me to accept something and then turn it down and then go away somewhere else. And so I think doing that, being an upstanding person with scruples, not trying to play both sides, not trying to do any of that, that really helped me, because it's like 5 months, I was in Yuma, learning a lot, growing a lot as a reporter. And I got a call from the news director in Reno, the one who I'd turned down, saying, we now have a weekend anchor position open and we're very interested in you for that. And so at that point I was like, okay, I'll fly up and take a look, see what we got here. And so I did, and they offered me the job. And so I left. I left 6.5 months after I got to Yuma. And, no offense to Yuma, but I was happy to go to Reno, a lot closer to home, a lot closer to Tahoe, et cetera. So leaving Yuma was not difficult to do. Again, it was a great town. It served me really well. I made some great friends there, and certainly built the beginnings of my career there. But I was happy to move on. And so from that point on, though, my goal was always to get back to the Bay Area. It's where I'm from, family, friends, et cetera. And so I decided that whenever I went to the Bay Area, I would visit KTVU, because I interned there and I knew people there and I just kept in touch and everything like that. And so I would always go in and bring my tape and bring my resume and all that, just to keep people updated on what's going on. So I got there in 94 to Reno, and in 95 I started talking with KTVU about the possibility of working for them. And then in 96 they offered me the job, which I automatically accepted, because there was nothing that I wanted more than to come to KTVU, greatest station in the country, frankly, at that point. So yeah, there was nowhere else I wanted to go. there wasn't a strategy per se. It was just things kind of fell into place. And, along the way, I was looking at other things. And I was talking to someone in New York by going to New York from Reno, and so, some other things that were cooking, but nothing major. KTVU was the one that really stuck, and it was the one that I wanted more than anything else anyway. So it just worked out really well.
Well, it worked out for you, John. But I think to recap for students is that having scruples about this is what I'm saying I'm going to do, and people remember that you may not like the decision that you make immediately, but also just following up with people and letting them know, hey, this is the latest in my career. Staying in touch with those different people. And so sometimes you get lucky, but most of the time you create your luck based on the things that you do. And so I think those are great stories that you just gave there, John.
And I would say, just to sum that up, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I mean, yes, you absolutely have to cultivate relationships. And when I say that, I mean cultivate relationships of the people you know now, your classmates. One of your classmates could hire you down the road. That's entirely possible. And it's always good to keep good relationships going. And, bottom line is we need more connection in our world anyway. We, especially with this kind of stuff right here, right? People just don't connect with each other as they used to. And so the more you can do that, the more you're going to serve yourself in the business world. Academically, you're going to serve yourself. Relationships, you're going to serve yourself. So I would say keep in touch with everybody, keep a good relationship with everybody, and you never know how it's going to pay off down the road.
All right, so let's transition into your transition of working in communications. I want to echo what John said about KTVU, because I think it's hard to comprehend nowadays the power of KTVU, because before it was a Fox affiliate, this was an independent station that had so much local in-depth news. The 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. news was legendary. My family watched it all the time. It was in my mind, it was the pinnacle of what local news should be and could be. And you were there for 2 decades. Explain the process of it's time to do something new, and what were the biggest pros and cons that you're weighing in your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, very loaded question, but
I'm good at those.
after 20 years at KTVU, after 25 years in the business, I felt like I'd done everything. I felt like I had seen all the things that I wanted to see, met all the people I wanted to meet, covered all the kinds of stories I wanted to cover. Certainly there's still stories I see today. I'm like, oh, I'd love to cover that, right? But by and large, I had done the things I wanted to do. I'd accomplished what I wanted to do, and I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a plateau there. And so I wanted a new challenge. And on top of that, I did feel less and less like what I was doing as a news person was really making a difference in the world. I just felt like it was becoming somewhat mundane in the kind of news that we were covering and the meaning it had in people's lives. That's not to say every story, I certainly had great stories along the way that really did impact people, but it just felt kind of day to day like there wasn't as much meaning in what we were doing. And so I knew I wanted to go off into a different kind of business, communications, obviously, but still a very different kind of business. And it was just a matter of finding the right fit, the right kind of venue for it. And it just turned out that I found the job because I'd applied at a variety of other locations before I got the job at Oakland Unified. And none of them, in retrospect, none of them, even once I saw OUSD pop up in my plans, none of them compared to what I do now. And because they just didn't have the kind of appeal with regard to the kind of impact I felt like I could have in the day-to-day that I do at OUSD. And so I knew that I wanted to make a change. I knew that it was really time to move on from news. And I knew that I wanted to do a job that really had me in a position where I could be feeling day-to-day like I'm making more of a difference and having, an impact on people's lives. And, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and get all melodramatic or anything like that. I'm not saying I have a ton of impact on our kids, but I certainly feel like I help a little bit. And so it was just a matter of finding the right fit. And then once I saw the OUSD position open, I said, that makes a lot of sense because, again, I worked in Oakland for 20 years. I knew the city. I knew the problems that the city faced. I knew the city government. I knew the schools a little bit. I'd been in the schools. I have always appreciated and advocated for public education. I'm a product of public education, everything except for that year and a half at Whittier. I'm a huge supporter of the CSU system, San Diego State, the UC system. Berkeley is where I grew up, right next to UC Berkeley. So to me, it was a matter of just seeing an opportunity where I felt like I could really have an impact in the world. And definitely in the 7.5 years that I've been there, I feel like I have. It feels good to do the work that we do. The work here is never done. There's always more to do. There's always more help that's needed. But I feel like as the advocate that I am, I'm able to bridge some of the gaps that we have and make a difference there. So it really was, again, leading a business I loved, but finding another business and another position I love even more, because that's how it's worked out for me.
Well, at JMS, the journalism and media studies, the expression is we make storytellers. So you're telling stories in different ways, but maybe give us an example of a story or two that you've done recently that stands out, so that kind of get more details about these are the types of stories, how you present them, how you tell the stories of these kids.
A story I did back in December, a press release I put out, some of the local media took it and ran with it, did their own stories on it, was highlighting one of our recent graduates, young lady by the name of Eleanor Wickstrom, who went to Skyline High School, graduated in 2020 during the pandemic, during that first year of the pandemic, ended up going to Harvard. So super smart young woman, super successful. She was captain of her track team, captain of her cross-country team at Skyline. She was CIS Student Athlete of the Year. She was someone who had just a huge impact while she was here in Oakland and continues to have an impact at Harvard. She found out in the fall that she's going to be a Rhodes Scholar. And so I profiled her in that story. And it was just really amazing to hear from her. In fact, she and I did kind of a podcast like this, where we talked for half an hour just about her experiences in OUSD, her experiences at Harvard, and what she's looking forward to with regard to being a Rhodes Scholar. So, you don't hear about Rhodes Scholars from Oakland very often. You don't hear about, that kind of remarkable success that often. I mean, really anywhere. There are 2 Rhodes Scholars from the Bay Area. One's in, I think, Saratoga or something like that, and is friends with Eleanor. But to have one from our district, from one of our schools, from our kids, I mean, it just shows our kids what is possible. And that's one of the things I love doing, is just showing great success for our kids and reminding all the other kids, all the other families, staff, this is what is possible for everybody here. Let's make sure that we get them those opportunities. And so that was a really great story that I really enjoyed doing. Eleanor is someone that I knew pretty well when she was in high school as well. So that's one of the great things about this job, is I get to know a lot of our kids, whether I get to know some elementary kids, some middle school kids, some high school kids, and I love doing that. I love working with them. I love supporting them when they have issues going on. I love helping them out. I love writing letters of recommendation, et cetera. Anything I can do to make a difference in the life of a young person, I'm going to do, which is why I've been coaching high school girls lacrosse for 12 years now. So it's all about, at this stage of my life, it really is mostly all about giving back, making a difference, trying to help people get what they want out of life as well.
In my previous career, when I was a newspaper reporter, I was at the Oakland Tribune for 10 years, and I spent 3 years covering high school sports. And I really look back on that fondly. I think the Oakland Athletic League is just a special place. And back when newspapers were a big deal, I would walk into a gym, I'd walk to a football field, people would see me. I'll never forget the quantity of times that the kids who were playing, they're like, Oakland Tribune's in the house. They're like, it's a big game when the Oakland Tribune's in the house. And they get all excited. And people loved me because I was telling the positive stories about what's happening in Oakland. Like the news section, not always stories about Rhodes Scholars. The sports section was like, this person's getting a scholarship. This team just won their league title. So let me transition from the happy stories that I was writing, John. Unfortunately, the times that we live in, sometimes there's a lockdown. Sometimes there is something that's going on at one of your schools. So teach us how your mind works when some type of breaking news crisis is going on or might be going on at one of your schools.
Yeah, before I get to that, let me just say that after I arrived in OUSD, since then, in the 7.5 years since I've been here, we have won, I think, 8 state championships, 4 in football and 4 or 5 in basketball. Girls teams, boys teams, and then the same football team has won 4 state championships. So I'd like to think I'm good luck, but it's my impact or not. But no, just the kids here are amazing. They do amazing work, both on the field, on the court, et cetera. And so that's one of those things I've really gotten the pleasure out of being able to help celebrate is that kind of success among our kids. I love that. And planning celebrations, planning parades when we did those, et cetera. So that's all been great. With regard to crises, when something bad is happening, and that's I have more experience with that just because of all my experience in the news than most people have in their entire life, because I've been on so many kind of breaking sorts of press conferences and everything. I know how they work. I know what the media is looking for. I know what they're trying to get from the spokespeople. I know the pressures they're under, time wise, et cetera. For me, it was when it comes to something challenging happening, that's actually where I feel like I thrive the most. Kind of like I thrived doing breaking news when I was a reporter. I like being in front of the camera when it comes to talking about something that's challenging. Obviously you have to prepare as much as possible. You have to know your topic as well as you can. You should never rush, never feel like you have to do it on the timeline of the news people who are there asking for you to talk to them. You can do it on your own timeline. Make sure you get the information you need before you go over there. And if it takes you an extra 10, 20 minutes to do that, go do it. But once you're in a position where you know what you're talking about, you've got the information you need, then it's just a matter of making sure that you're ready for all the questions that are going to come, and you can stay calm and not be flustered by anything that anybody's asking you. Bottom line is, one thing that people in communications kind of forget sometimes is those of us in communications, we don't work for the news. Like, the news is not our boss. Now, we want to give them as much information as quickly as we can, but that doesn't necessarily mean giving them all the information or giving them information every time. And so it's understanding that relationship that I think helps a lot of communications people. Is just understanding that, okay, you shouldn't be in a hurry. You should be talking to people you need to talk to. You talk to your legal team if you need to talk to them. Just make sure that you go out there fully prepared, and you should be fine. Speaking in front of a bunch of cameras, especially if you know that some of them are live or all of them are live, that's a different challenge. But try not to get caught up in that, because it's not really relevant to what you're doing. You are literally just answering questions to the people who are asking them. You don't have to look into the camera. You don't have to do anything like that. But make sure that you are ready to answer those questions. And if you're not, if a question comes up that you can't answer, just say, hey, I don't have that information for you. I'll get back to you on that. Or, I'll look to see if I can find that information, or, that I can't comment on that, whatever. There are easy ways, honestly, to get out of many questions. So it's just a matter of making sure that you have 1 or 2 outs just kind of in the back of your mind, ready to go in case you come across a question you can't answer.
This is also great. I feel like I could talk to John for hours and hours and tell me about this story and tell me about this story. Tell me about what you do now. But I do want to start to wrap things up here. Before we do, though, John, I want to, I've kind of tried to hit on a few different things, but if there's other piece of advice that you want to give, something that I forgot to ask you that you think is really relevant about your career, maybe something that you think that students would really be able to learn from, just whatever I forgot to ask. What is something else that you'd like to leave us with on this podcast?
I'm gonna come back to what I said earlier, and that is the thing that I emphasize to young people every time I talk to them about this kind of thing is keep your eyes and ears open, because you never know where inspiration for your career is going to come from. And it could be your first career, it could be your second career. You never know what's going to happen, and it could be a book, like I said, I just a little passage in a book. It could be something you see on TV. It could be a conversation with a friend. It could be something you learn in a class. It could be something that you hear at work, someone that you meet just out and about who tells you about their interesting career. Keep your eyes and ears open, and there's a good chance that you're going to figure out what you want to do. And I'll just say that I'm quite proud one of the proudest things in my life is the fact that I coach high school girls lacrosse at Alhambra and Martinez here in the Bay Area. And at least two of my former players are currently at San Diego State. And they're both loving it. And one of them, a young woman named Austin, who's one of your RAs there at San Diego State, she went in planning to be a physical therapist or something similar. And along the way, she's changed to communications. So it's really exciting to see that, and knowing that so many people. It's funny because so many people go into college thinking they know what they're going to do, thinking they have every idea of what kind of career they want, et cetera. But until you've been in college, high school is great. All the schooling that you do up until college is great. But until you've been in a college, especially a college the size of San Diego State, where there's so many different academic options, so many different classes you can take, so many things that are, maybe outside what you've taken before. Like I said, I took some anthropology classes, which I just absolutely loved. When you're in an environment like that, there's what I tell people when they go to college is try to sample things that you wouldn't think to do. Okay. Try sampling something that, take a class, just a random class in another department. Try something that's new. Try a different kind of science. Try a different kind of English. Try a different kind of language or whatever. Something that opens your eyes to all the other things that are out there. Again, it may not give you an idea for a new career, but it will open your eyes to more things in the world. And that's what education is really about, is opening your eyes to the world, getting you to a position where you can think more easily, reason more easily, problem solve more easily. And the more information that you put in your head along the way, the more tools you're going to have in order to do those tasks that come down in front of you. So I just say, keep your eyes and ears open for information at all times. Don't do too much of this whole scrolling thing. I do more than I need to, but try to make sure that you're reading everything, keeping up on world events, paying attention to politics, because politics affects every one of us. And I'll just say this. I actually said this to a class I was speaking to last week at Oakland High School. I said, there are people in this country right now who are banning books from schools. They are trying to take information away from our kids, period. That is what they want. They don't want us, the general population, to have all the information out there. I'm sorry. It's just absolutely wrong. It shouldn't be happening. I mean, there are states in this country right now that are banning To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird. Or Toni Morrison books, or like all these amazing bits of literature that has so much different perspective and information to learn and grow from and to share. It is simply about restricting the kind of information that people have, so that they don't have the kind of knowledge that they need to be successful in life. That's what it is. It's this idea that schools or teachers are groomers or anything like that. It's just absolutely absurd. It's ridiculous. And, the whole notion of being gay and everything is a big topic these days. And ask any gay person, and they are not going to say that, oh, a book made me gay. That's absolutely not what happens. It's something that they feel, that they grow up with, that they know from a young age. It has nothing to do with a book that they read. They don't get the idea and think, oh yeah, I'll just do that. It's absurd. So books and information are not a threat to a functioning, healthy democracy. And that's what, if you want a functioning, healthy democracy, you need to keep yourself informed. And that goes for anything. That's not just, trying to find a job. That's not trying to be better at your job or anything like that. That's trying to be a good, conscientious, successful, involved citizen of the United States. Our democracy is precious. It is fragile, and we need to take care of it.
Love the passion that John has. And I think, especially in that last answer, you really hear what it means for him to be an advocate. And you can't always do that when you are in the newsroom. And so I love that.
Can I let me say, right? You hit on one of the things that I absolutely love about making that transition. I forgot to mention. Yes, my entire career in broadcasting, 25 years, I had to be very quiet about my political views, because you don't want the viewers to know your political views, because automatically some of them think that the news that you're going to put on the air is going to be biased because of your views. And nobody had any idea what my political views were while I was a reporter, because I would be in public at a restaurant and I would have political conversations very quietly because I didn't want anybody around me to hear. Having been on the air at Channel 2 for as long as I was, people knew who I was. So I didn't want people saying, oh, John Sasaki, I hear him talking politics and I disagree with him or whatever. So I was always very careful about that. But now, while we are an apolitical organization that is a school district, we also do many things in our district that are perhaps objectionable to some people across the country. And yet they all align with my politics. And so I have no problem advocating for those things. And it's advocating for, better gun control to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. It's advocating for, LGBTQ rights. It's advocating for religious rights. It's advocating for minority rights and women's rights and all those things, which in some views are maybe not the things that people want to hear about in certain parts of our country. They don't agree with those things, and that's fine. But here in Oakland, I can say that those are the politics of Oakland, and those are the politics of many people within our district. And so when I advocate for something like LGBTQ rights, I'm advocating for it because I know that everybody that's what it's about. That's what acceptance and tolerance and understanding and empathy. That's what it's all about. It's about making sure that people in our country, no matter what they are, where they come from, how they are, how they present themselves, whatever, that they don't have obstacles in front of them to prevent them from all the success that every one of us deserves. And so that has been a really good thing for me is getting myself into a position where I can actually openly advocate for safety and for better treatment of minorities and all the other things that we deal with across our district and across our city and really across our nation right now.
So the way that we wrap things up on this podcast is we brag about other San Diego State alums who are making us proud. Normally I go second, but John, I'm going to go first this time because I found a San Diego State alum who also started in broadcast journalism and made a transition. And also, since you were one who you never know where the inspiration is going to come that's going to change your life, well, let me tell everyone the story about a woman by the name of Tori Bolt, B-O-L-T. She's from the class of 2013. She majored in journalism, media studies. She was working at KTVU and then KUSI, San Diego 6 News. Then she moves out to Charleston, South Carolina, and she's working for the NBC affiliate that is there. And then something interesting happens to her. She gets married. She gets married to a member of a band, the band called Need to Breathe. And for a honeymoon gift, her husband builds her a treehouse. Yes, he builds her a treehouse. Well, they put it on Airbnb. The listing went crazy. They had a wait list of over 6 months. It was featured on Netflix, BuzzFeed, Magnolia, Southern Living, so much more. So they decided to build a business out of it. They have had over 5,000 guests per year. They continue to grow. 18-acre mountaintop property just outside of Chattanooga. It is called Bolt Farm Treehouse, as in their last name. Bolt Farm Treehouse. Kind of nice. Lightning bolts, chargers, even though they're not there. So you never know where the inspiration for your career will come from. Tori Bolt got a treehouse from her husband, and now what a business it is.
That is amazing. That's great. That's awesome.
Your turn. Who do you want to brag about? I know you've already mentioned a bunch of your former classmates. Who else from San Diego State do you want to give shout outs to?
I'm going to mention another one of my former players at Alhambra lacrosse.
Okay.
Someone who graduated at Alhambra, gosh, I think it's probably about 7 years ago. In fact, maybe 2017. And she ended up going to San Diego State. Her name is Daria Dragicevic. Great young lady. And she ended up, when she was at San Diego State, she played, I believe, on the water polo team for a little bit. And then she had a medical setback. Something came out of nowhere. And she ended up with what's called dystonia. It's a neurological problem that affects balance and a variety of other things. I think recently she's been in a wheelchair, but she's been pursuing her PhD in some kind of medicine related to research kind of medicine related to her disorder. So she is at Boston University now getting her doctorate. I think she's already done a master's. and she's just this remarkable young woman who was dealt a really tough blow right there with this disorder that she came to deal with, and she's turned it into her life's work, and it's so inspiring to see, and inspiring just to see her dealing with it, with her situation so well. But not only that, she's actually taking it, using it as motivation and as a possible career for herself, or really a career for herself. So Daria is an amazing young woman, and I'm so proud to have been her coach, and I'm really proud that she's doing all the great things that she's doing right now.
Oh, I love that story. Well done. Natural storytellers. John, this was such a treat. Again, I watched you a ton on television, always respected your career, and I love the perspective you gave on this podcast. Thank you for being so generous with your time. This was really fun.
Happy to help anytime.
Once again, that is John Sasaki. My name is Josh Suchon. I'm the host of the Where You At podcast. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms, in person, or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.